Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be covering DNS cache poisoning. This is Dan Kaminsky's attack. My name is Alejandra, and my teammates are Sunny and Ishan. So, some of the topics we're going to be covering today are DNS, and as I mentioned before, Dan Kaminsky's fast DNS poisoning attack. We're gonna be looking at how it works and why it's important. We are also gonna show a demo, and we're gonna be talking about how can we enhance DNS security. Start, I would like to introduce a little bit about domain name system, DNS. This translates domain names into IP addresses. So, for example, any website like google.com, it will translate into an IP address. Then we're going to be talking about attacks, cache poisoning, and then we're going to be looking at some examples. Um, we'll cover some examples, some flaws that were found in DNS. This is going to be the 1999 edition that discusses the 16-bit transactions, and also the 2008 edition that discusses about ways in which to get around TTL defenses.
Hi, I'm Ishan. So my friend Alhandra introduced you to the DNS. So just to quickly recap, computers don't understand the language of humans like the English. So it just understands numbers. So when you type a website like example.com, your computer doesn't know its IP address. So it asks its DNS resolver. The resolver either returns a cached answer or queries the from other DNS servers until it finds the correct IP. Once it gets an answer, it catches the result for the future use. The problem DNS wasn't designed with strong security in mind, and it trusts whatever response arrives first. First come, first serve basis, as long as that it has the correct transaction ID. Now, we are looking at the root DNS servers. What is root DNS servers? I'll explain you in upcoming slides. But just to let you know, there are only 13 root servers all around the world that are spread across. You can see by the letters A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, and M. So there are 13 root servers all in all. Going over to the next slide. So this is how a DNS root operates. So let's say these are the users. So let's say you type in example.com. So your query gets sent to the DNS server. This is local ISP based. What happens is that it forwards the request to the root server. What root server does is that it considers the request and it associates it with the top level domain. Let's say that the top level for example.com, it's .com, so it sends to the appropriate TLD server the request to appropriate TLD server with .com domain. What happens then is that it does not know what is the exact address for the example.com. It handles .com domains. So what it does is that it finally sends the request to the authoritative name server. This is the final authority in answering any questions regarding any queries. So what it does is that it then fetches it has all the records. So it fetches the IP address for example.com and it gives back to DNS server, and then it goes back to the user whoever requested it. So there are some flaws in DNS. So in 1999, there was a flaw discovered which said that there are 16-bit transaction IDs in each query, and if an attacker guesses that ID correctly, then he'll be able to manipulate that. In 2008, Dan Kaminsky found a new vulnerability. It was regarding the time to live. So for how much time a query can remain, DNS result can remain in a cache, that's how the vulnerability was exploited. To see that, we'll see how it goes. So just to let you know, there are few record types. For A is the address record, so it associates the domain name with the IP address. MX associates address with its mail delivery, mail server. NS record is the name server record, so it associates it with its name server. So this is how it works. So user sends the query to the DNS name server. Then it sends, like I said in previous slides, to the ahead servers. What it does is that it guesses the transaction ID. So transaction ID is 12345. It sends n number of attacks on the server with the transaction IDs. Let's say 12345 is the correct one. So what it happens is that in the cache records it gets exploited and the fake address site goes into the cache. So now you see example A with 10.11.12.13, which this guy sent, which is not the original address, gets saved in the cache. So what comments get discovered that there was another problem. If the attacker's quite intelligent one, what he can do is he can entirely replace the name server's address as well. So not the website server, the entire name address server. So from this, it can have multiple addresses and multiple websites associated with it. So if it can exploit that, he can control all n number of websites for it. So it sends the NS query with the authoritative record, and this gets now stored into, you see now, so this is the bad example. So this is how example.com gets bad DNS. It's manipulated DNS, and it stores the fake address as well, what the attacker intends to do. So for next slide, I'd like to hand it over to my partner Sunny, who will explain you the demonstration.
Now moving on to the attack demonstration. We have used a Docker setup with a custom network with a defined subnet of 172.30.0.0/16, which assigns fixed IPs to each container. Here we are using 4 containers which each have a particular function, which are: one works as a DNS resolver with IP of 172.30.0.2, an attacker with IP of 172.30.0.4 that launches the attack by sending spoof responses with varying query IDs to the DNS resolver. A victim which has an IP of 172.30.0.3 that we're going to use to send DNS queries. A DNS server with IP of 172.30.0.5, which we have set to respond with static IP of 1.2.3.4, which is done to isolate the attack. Here we have all the containers up and running. Now, when we check for DNS using the command for google.com, we're going to receive an IP of 1.2.3.4, which is the static IP we have set to return on the DNS server. Now when we run an attack on example.com, setting its IP to attacker's IP, and after we put in a DNS query for attacker example.com, we are going to receive an IP of 172.30.0.4. Now, these sort of attacks aren't unstoppable. There are many ways to add countermeasures to prevent these types of attacks, such as DNSSEC, shortening TTL values, or implement 0x20 encoding. The one we have implemented here is 0x20 encoding, which randomizes the query, and the DNS resolver remembers the randomized query structure it sent to the DNS. As the DNS is case insensitive, it always responds back with correct IP. And this decreases the chance of attacker being successful, as now the attacker also has to check for randomization along with varying query IDs. Here we have a similar sort of Docker structure where we have our attacker, victim DNS, our main DNS all running. Now, as we go to our attacker and start our attack to poison the DNS cache, and as the attack is running, even though we do a DNS query for example.com, it would return us the static value we have initially set for the DNS server. Now, this, as you can see, this happens because the resolver every time chooses a randomized uh, query to send to the main DNS server. And however time we run the DNS query for example.com, it's not gonna falter to this sort of attacks. This is a conclusive slide to our presentation. Throughout this presentation, we have learned about DNS and how it works, and some attacks that take advantage of the flaws that were observed in DNS. We also have demonstrated a DNS attack and showed how this attack works. We have also talked about some defensive measures such as DNSSEC, shortening of TTL values, and 0x20 encoding. We have also demonstrated 0x20 encoding and how it prevents from these attacks from happening. Thank you. Have a good day.